Sydney, in the beautiful red dress right there. She was 18 years old.
Louder.
Good afternoon. My name is Terry Almanza. I retired from the Chicago Police Department Gang Investigations Unit in May 2020 with 27 years of service. I am the founder of the Drug Induced Homicide Foundation, a nationwide non-for-profit organization supporting our judicial system and bereaved families advocating for justice in the lethal poisonings of our children. I want to first start off by asking the class a few questions. How many of you prior to today's in-service training have heard of the 1989 Drug-Induced Homicide statute? Show of hands. Maybe 5, 6. How many of you have participated in a criminal investigation following a drug toxicity death? 2 or 3. Thank you. Can anyone provide an estimate as to the number of homicides recorded in Chicago since 2015? And these are firearm-related, knives, not opioid-related deaths. Anyone have a clue as to how many opioid-related deaths there have been since 2015? And I'm a very visual person, so. $3,235 lives lost in the city of Chicago since 2015. Anyone have a clue how many opioid-related deaths have occurred since 2015 in the city of Chicago? Anyone give a guess?
Double or 2 times?
Over double.
Oh my.
Lastly, can anyone tell me the number of convictions in Chicago since 2015 for drug-induced homicide?
4. 2.
3. 3. We can do better than that. I want to first extend my deepest gratitude to Chief Deanahan and the Detective Division for implementing the Drug-Induced Homicide Special Order, which outlines the procedures of investigative responsibility related to drug toxicity deaths. I am honored to be given the opportunity to speak on this topic, which is very near and dear to my heart. Prior to the current administration, drug toxicity deaths were classified as non-criminal and closed without any investigation. Nothing in life can prepare a parent for the day in which they receive notification that their child is not breathing and that all life-saving measures have been exhausted. Riding alongside your child in the ambulance, holding her tiny little hand as she is brought down to the Cook County Medical Examiner's office to determine the cause of her sudden death is a heartache that I wish upon no one. I'd say the next closest traumatic event in comparison to burying my daughter Sydney was fighting for justice in her homicide, a fight which no parent should ever be tasked with. On May 31st, 2015, my husband John found our 18-year-old daughter Sydney's lifeless body lying across her bed, cold to the touch. Sydney had ingested a lethal amount of MDMA that she bought from 2 local drug dealers in anticipation of attending an upcoming music festival. I immediately checked Sydney's call history and Safari searches, identifying the persons responsible for unlawfully delivering her a lethal dose of MDMA, but her case was closed immediately and classified as non-criminal. How could this be? How could someone give my daughter an illicit narcotic and she die, and they walk away with zero accountability? A beautiful teenager with her whole life ahead of her. A recent Queen of Peace High School graduate, a standout athlete pursuing her volleyball career after recently signing a collegiate scholarship to continue to play volleyball, and love beyond measure. I researched and identified the drug-induced homicide statute, which is simply defined as the unlawful delivery of a controlled substance resulting in a death, a Class X felony punishable with a minimum term of imprisonment of 6 years and a maximum of 30 years. I networked with McHenry, Will, and Lake County State's Attorney's Office, who had success prosecuting drug-induced homicide cases. McHenry County State's Attorney Patrick Keneally sharing that the number of opioid-related deaths have dropped significantly since the prosecution of these drug dealers. This, we truly believe, is tangibly resulting in lives being saved. I once again pleaded with the detectives to reopen Sydney's case and investigate her case criminally. But I was repeatedly reminded that there was no protocol to investigate her death criminally, even despite the 1989 criminal statute. I requested that the detectives bring in the suspected dealers for questioning, but I was advised by the Chicago Police Department that Sydney's dealers would never admit to selling Sydney a lethal dose of MDMA. I pleaded, can we just try? I refused to accept that her death was nothing more than a tragic accident. I was repeatedly told by detectives that Sydney made a choice. Sydney never made a choice to die. A good friend said it best, our children are supposed to learn from their mistakes, not die from them. It is not my intention to ever speak poorly of our judicial system, but rather to advocate towards a shift in thinking by law enforcement officers and prosecutors away from past protocols on thinking accidental to now classifying these cases as criminal and treating every suspected drug toxicity death as a homicide. Our judicial system will often share that these deaths are difficult to prosecute. I disagree. Yes, they can be incredibly difficult to prosecute when our judicial system fails to treat these cases as the homicides that they are. A few fallacies that I'd like to clear up with the Illinois Drug Induced Homicide statute. Detectives must wait on toxicology results to investigate. False. That there must be money exchanged. False. That force was involved. The dealer administered the lethal dose. False. That the drug dealer knew that the substance contained fentanyl or an analog of fentanyl. False. Illinois statute includes all controlled substances. That an eyewitness must be on the scene. False. Cases that involve combined drug toxicity cannot result in a conviction. False. Please see Illinois versus Neer regarding causation and contributing factor. Detectives must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the drug dealer had criminal intent to commit murder. False. 16 months after Sydney's homicide, my pleas for justice were finally answered. Sydney's case was reopened and reassigned to Area 2 Detectives Schlater and Velasquez. Suspects Brent Tyson and Cynthia Parker were brought in for questioning and both admitted to selling Sydney 1 gram of MDMA, who they referred to as an inexperienced user. Both were charged with drug-induced homicide, and not surprisingly, they bonded out. While out on bond, Brent Tyson and Cynthia Parker were charged on a separate case after selling 1 gram of MDMA to an undercover Orland Park officer. Both defendants were on the hook for my daughter's homicide, and they went and they did it again. I am incredibly proud to share that in 2018, Brent Tyson and Cynthia Parker were convicted of my daughter's homicide. I am forever grateful to Detective Schlater and Velasquez for their professionalism, their hard work, and their dedication. Locking up a drug dealer will not bring my daughter back, but I am confident that our efforts will save the lives of others. I am confident that pursuing the persons within the chain of delivery sends a clear and unmistakable message to these drug dealers that anyone profiting from the misery and suffering of an unlawful sale of a controlled substance that results in a death will be held criminally liable. According to the DEA's Chicago Field Division, deadly counterfeit pills containing fentanyl are everywhere in Chicago. They're available in street deals, for purchase online, in schools. Unsuspecting people think that they're getting a pharmaceutical grade pill like Oxycontin, Percocet, and Xanax, and they die. Drug dealers peddling poison to unsuspecting children, young adults, and members of our community who they think are legitimate prescription drugs. Drug dealers are able to practically anonymously sell to unsuspecting victims and deliver potentially poisonous drugs as easy as a DoorDash of a Jimmy John sandwich. More than 9.5 million counterfeit pills were seized in 2021. Fentanyl is a synthetic drug similar to heroin, but 10 times stronger. Even a small amount of fentanyl, as small as a grain of sand, can kill you. If you have teenagers at home, please be aware that fentanyl-related deaths have increased in young adults ages 15 to 24 by 486%. Please monitor your children's social media. In my 6 years of speaking with families, law enforcement, and prosecutors, I feel strongly that the cellular phones are often the key to identifying the source of the unlawful delivery. Examining public and private domain, file storage, web pages, and other cloud content. State's Attorney Patrick Keneally held weekly meetings with his state's attorneys that I was invited to sit in on, where his state's attorneys reviewed the drug-induced homicide cases, sharing their techniques and strengthening each and every case. Whether it was digitally extracting evidence from a phone, tablet, or laptop, tollway records, running DNA and or prints, checking banking apps, ATM visits, recovering narcotics paraphernalia on the scene, retrieving video surveillance, collecting statements of witnesses or potential suspects, by bus and confidential informants. I promise you that the evidence is there. In June 2019, I was contacted by Sylvia Schaefer, a bereaved mother whose son Josh was found deceased in his apartment located in the Edgewater neighborhood with suspicion of illicit drugs involved. The victim's phone, a detailed journal belonging to the victim, and narcotics, as well as paraphernalia, were left on the scene by Chicago police. I contacted the detective assigned to Josh's case requesting permission to inventory those items and request a phone dump by RCFL. The detective responded that the case had already been closed, but that he did not mind any additional steps inventorying and processing additional evidence. He inquired as to why I wanted to take these steps. I replied to pursue a drug-induced homicide conviction. He laughed. I knew that he meant no disrespect, as past protocol did not dictate any further investigation. I am proud to share that these additional steps assisted in the drug-induced homicide of Christopher Paulus and the homicide of Joshua Bloomfield. The same dealer that boasted via text message to the victim that his raw laid you out like Tyson in his prime. When the media inquired about prosecuting drug-induced homicide cases, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office related that their focus is on violent crime. For the record, Ms. Fox, it is the narcotics that fund these gangs and fund the operation. Selling illicit drugs provides the gangs with the money to buy the guns that are used to shoot at rival gang members, and in many cases, shoot at law enforcement officers and innocent children. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office further commented that they do not have a policy against the drug-induced homicide statute. It just doesn't get many cases from the Chicago Police Department. I hope that sharing my loss and advocacy for justice will offer some guidance in your pursuit to prosecute your cases criminally. I mostly hope and pray that no parent ever has to endure the indescribable pain of losing a child, coupled with fighting for justice in their child's homicide. Please grab my card and follow us on Facebook at Drug Induced Homicide Foundation. Our website is also included on there. Please carry Narcan. Thank you and be safe, and congratulations to all of you on your promotion.